I am absolutely obsessed with ancient tools and weapons. From Bronze Age daggers to Neanderthal spearheads, I've made them all. It connects you with the people who lived thousands of years ago, using what they had to survive. But what if I told you that there's a group of people today, right now, who still live like that? No metallurgy, no agriculture, and no YouTube tutorials. Just bows, spears, and survival. I'm talking about the people of North Sentinel Island, the most isolated people on Earth. These people have resisted contact for thousands of years. They're completely cut off from the modern world, and they want it that way. They hunt, they fish, they survive. And most fascinating of all, they craft their own deadly weapons. Today we are going to be discussing these people in depth and even recreating and hunting with their weapons. Just how deadly were they? And could I actually survive in the wild with them? Let's find out in this episode of North02. Okay, so first of all, let's demystify who the Sentinelese are, how long they've been there, and who they're related to. North Sentinel Island is right off the coast of the much larger Andaman and Nicobar Islands. These islands are home to their own unique ethnic groups such as the Anj, the Jangal, the Jarawas, and the Great Andamanese. The people of North Sentinel Island are related to the people of the Andaman Islands to some extent, but another question is arising. Why do the people of these islands located in the middle of the Indian Ocean seemingly look, well, African? This is a fair question to ask, considering that most people I know would assume this man is from somewhere in Africa. But in reality, human populations are far more complicated and nuanced than they may seem. The Sentinelese and Andamanese belong to a group known as the Negritos. This is the name early European adventurers gave to the short-statured, dark-skinned people found all across Southeast Asia. So where did these people come from and who are they related to? Genetic studies have determined that all East Eurasian people came in a single wave of migration which happened over 50,000 years ago. The Andamanese in particular have genetic affinity with ancestral South Indians as well as Australasian populations. But unlike other Asian populations that evolved lighter skin, the Andamanese kept their dark skin and evolved their unique facial features adapted to their tropical island homes. So though they may superficially look African, this just goes to show you how deceitful physical appearance can be. Genetically, this person is far more related to this person than they are to anyone in Africa. This example underscores the complexity of human evolution and cautions against making assumptions about ancestry based solely on physical appearance. Okay, so the Sentinelese are an Asian population, but how long have they been on their island? Well, to find this out, we must once again look to their neighbors on the Andaman Islands. Genetically, the different populations on the Andaman Islands all share a common origin which is estimated to have been after 26,000 years ago, suggesting that they came to the Andaman Islands as one population at this time and have diversified since. This would make sense considering that 26,000 years ago, the sea levels were at their lowest, as the glaciers at the poles were their largest. This evidence makes us rethink the long-held belief that the people of these islands had been there since the earliest waves of modern humans out of Africa some 70,000 years ago. Okay, so people got to these islands around 30,000 years ago. That is a long time ago. North Sentinel Island may have been quickly inhabited as it has abundant fish and shellfish right offshore. And for whatever reason, the people who would inhabit these islands would cut themselves off from the people on the mainland. There is little evidence of trade, migration, or cultural exchange between them. Their language is mutually unintelligible with other Andaman languages, suggesting isolation for thousands of years. The Sentinelese are truly an isolated people, but this isolation would be broken a couple of times in the past few centuries. Historical attempts at contact from the 19th century to the 1990s were consistently met with hostility or at least extreme caution. Even when peaceful gift exchanges occurred, no meaningful communication or cultural interaction followed. Famously, a Christian missionary was killed by the tribe after kayaking to the island in hopes of converting them. I covered the entire story of contact with this video I made a year back. But what is important today is their tools. The Sentinelese are often referred to as the last people living in the Stone Age. But is this true? No, it's not true. From videos and photos, it is clear that they have scavenged a good deal of metal. But where did they get all this metal? Well, an entire ship became stranded on the shore of their island in 1981. The ship is still visible on Google Maps. Imagine just how bizarre it was to be on North Sentinel Island, excluded from the modern world, hunting fish and living outdoors, and suddenly a behemoth washes ashore. They had undoubtedly seen boats before, but only at a distance. Who knows how big they are? And then suddenly, the MV Primrose, a ship nearly 400 feet long, appeared. On the other side of the story were the crew. After being stranded ashore for a few days, noticed the Sentinelese armed with spear and bow, and were constructing boats to come out to the Primrose. The men aboard radioed for an urgent drop of firearms so they could defend themselves. Luckily, before anyone could be hurt, the men were rescued. After the men were rescued, the Sentinelese presumably went aboard the Primrose. One could only imagine how astonishing it would have been for the Sentinelese to come aboard this vessel for the first time. A massive craft full of mysterious objects that they could not explain. Metal, their precious tool material, present everywhere on board. Who are these strange invaders who can afford to make entire crafts out of such a precious substance? The experience these people had can only be comparable for a person of the modern world to enter an alien spacecraft. The majority of things they would have seen had no comparison to anything known to them. They undoubtedly utilized many of the objects found on board. The Primrose was carrying about 100 tons of chicken feed. Regardless, we can assume that they also went through some of the crew's quarters and other parts of the ship. It must have been a memorable experience for all involved and is likely still talked about today considering the remains still lay where they sat. The Primrose was still a very valuable ship and many wanted to salvage it. After 2 peaceful gift-giving encounters to the Sentinelese, it was finally deemed safe enough for salvage teams to come up and scrap the remains of the 16,000-ton Primrose. For 2 months, laborers worked on the site of the wreckage about 400 feet away from the coast on the island. Groups of between 7 to 10 men worked in shifts of a week, often in close proximity with the curious Sentinelese. Within only a few days, the Sentinelese took their makeshift boats out to investigate what was occurring. The salvage team was not frightened and offered the curious onlookers bananas. Salvage work continued for around a year and a half. The Sentinelese would make occasional visits and even climbing aboard within touching distance of the salvage team. They were reportedly quite frightened by their blowtorches. The islanders were offered scraps of metal for which they were only interested in the flat pieces rather than rods or tubes. This is incredibly important for our understanding of their tools. They get already flat pieces and likely grind them against stones to their desired shape. Before the Primrose got shipwrecked, they already had metal tools, meaning they must have scavenged metal from perhaps other shipwrecks or just garbage that floats ashore. It is likely that the Sentinelese encountered metal over a century ago, and may have been using it for their tools longer than anyone on the island remembers. So now let's finally analyze the tools that these people actually use. This photograph is the single most important image ever taken as far as their tool use goes. We see 3 men, each with a bow and about 3 to 4 arrows. First, let's analyze their arrows. They are extremely long, seemingly as long as they are tall, which is a little over 5 feet. While this photo was being taken, one of the crew was actually wounded by one of these arrows. Luckily, he was only minorly injured, but they were able to keep the arrow, and it has been described as being 2.5 meters long. If we zoom in on one of these arrows, it is clear that they have a very long broadhead attached with some kind of cordage, as well as 2 prongs. It is clear that these arrows are for hunting fish. The arrow goes in and the prongs keep the fish attached. The arrows are so long so that they can get the arrow right next to the fish, and so that they can easily grab the arrow after firing. The arrows have no fletching or feathers on the end, which makes sense considering that they are meant for close-range fishing. What is even more interesting is that the arrows seem to have a spiral pattern on them. These may be burn marks that occurred when straightening the arrow over a fire, but they look too uniform and perfect. I decided to recreate one of these arrows in order to see how effective it would be. I got a flat piece of metal and cheated by grinding it with modern tools. Next, I cut a notch into a wooden shaft as tall as me. I included little barbs from nails to make it look like the real thing, and hafted it into place using pine glue and deer sinew from a deer I hunted last fall. Then I decorated it by painting it with a spiral pattern. I was quite happy with the recreation, but now it's time to test it. I went to my local fishing hole and looked to hunt a northern pike. You can only shoot pike. Oh, I missed. Oh my god, I see the pike. Oh, perfect shot. Well, I can say that the arrows on North Sentinel Island definitely work for catching fish. I cooked up this pike and it was surprisingly good. I'm quite jealous of the Sentinelese. Besides the arrows, we also have multiple pictures of knives carried by the Sentinelese. We know that knives have been given to them in gift-giving missions. This knife appears in the photo and in the video where coconuts are given. It is seemingly almost a foot long and carried in the belt of one man. It is pretty frightening that he's not using a sheath, it just looks so dangerous. It appears to have some kind of handle, but it is hard to tell what it might be made out of. At first I thought the knife was made of a clear bottle that was flint-knapped, which would be cool, but I don't believe this to be the case. That is an interesting question though. Do the Sentinelese use stone or glass tools? We don't have any evidence as far as I am aware. It is unlikely that any flint or obsidian is naturally available on the island, though bottles probably are, and probably have been for hundreds of years. I was able to find a source about the natives on the nearby Andaman Islands using glass from bottles for tools. They would just get the thicker bases of beer and wine bottles and take small flakes off of them. The source says, the flake is held between the thumb and the first finger when it is being used. In no case is a flake of quartz or glass ever kept. It is only used when required and after having been used is thrown away. They use these flakes for scarification and shaving. Glass lost its importance in the economy of the Andaman Islanders after 1947, when plastic and aluminum containers and metal implements became more easily available. What I take away from this is that glass may have been used by the Sentinelese, and may still be used for tasks requiring a very sharp blade, such as shaving. After all, they do look like they shaved their faces, so they might just naturally not have a lot of facial hair. Another tool that we know that they use is the adze. The adze is one of the most used tools in history and hardly anyone even knows it exists. It is essentially just an axe with a horizontal blade. It is useful for woodworking and a variety of tasks. This is a replica of a stone adze that was used in Papua New Guinea. Even a stone adze is quite useful for shaping wood. The Sentinelese appear to have used metal blades in their adzes. There's video footage of them using them to grab coconuts near shore, and they're probably very useful for making those bows of theirs. Speaking of their bows, it is worth noting that the bow and arrow was not ubiquitous across the world. The bow was not used in Australia until contact and only spread around the Americas in the past few thousand years. The bow was likely invented in Africa over 70,000 years ago, and there is evidence of it in Sri Lanka around 40,000 years ago. It is possible that the first wave of people to make it to the Andaman Islands already had this technology. Another essential part of their kit is their clothing. They wear clothing that appears to have been made of scavenged fabric of some kind, or maybe even some kind of textile that they manufacture. Men often wear a headband, sometimes decorated, and a waistband. However they get this clothing, it is certainly quite fashionable. Another technology they have are rafts. They have been documented using simple rafts to fish in the nearby reefs. They maneuver these rafts with long poles by pushing off of the ground. They are certainly aware of boats, and considering a nice one ended up on shore and the occupants were killed, they know what a boat looks like. If they wanted to leave their island on a watercraft, I'm sure they could, but why would they? As far as they know, outsiders are dangerous and probably lead to death and disease. The Sentinelese are known to use fire. We know this from Triloki Nath Pandit, an Indian anthropologist who visited the island in 1991. Him and his team were able to visit the island and walk about 1 kilometer inland, where they found 18 huts, each with a fire. It is unlikely that the Sentinelese are actually able to create fire. Like their Andamanese neighbors, they probably have to wait for lightning to strike to harvest it. From then on, they just have to keep the embers going. It is so fascinating that they clearly understand how to tend to fire and keep it going, but they may not have figured out how to create it yet. It makes you realize how much we take for granted, and why it took thousands of years of inventions and cultural evolution to get to the modern world. Inventions that are seemingly obvious are often anything but. I'd like to see any of you go out there and start a fire with just natural materials. I'm sure maybe 1% of you could do it, but if someone didn't teach you how to do it, no chance. The last topic I want to mention is about the spiritual beliefs of the Andamanese. This can give us a hint about if the Sentinelese are religious. The Andamanese practice a form of animism, which is the attribution of a soul to inanimate objects and natural phenomena. Ancestor worship is also an important aspect of many of the practices of the Andaman Islands. Their general mythology states that man was created from split bamboo, while women were created from clay. Anthropologist Alfred Radcliffe-Brown was told a very interesting story while visiting in the early 1900s. The story was that the first man died and went to heaven, but the days of heaven ended when the forbidden vegetables in Paluga's garden were eaten. After which, the world grew overpopulated, didn't follow Paluga's laws, and the Great Flood only left 4 survivors, who lost their fire. This account is extremely interesting. What makes the spiritual beliefs of the Andamanese so fascinating is how they echo a pattern found in religions across the world. the idea that humanity's trouble began with breaking a food taboo. This theme appears in stories from Genesis to Greek mythology, and likely stretches back to the Ice Age, when early humans began assigning moral and spiritual meaning to what they could and couldn't eat. In hunter-gatherer societies, food was often sacred, and taboos around it served both symbolic and practical functions. Whether consciously or not, many of these taboos helped protect people from dangerous or toxic foods, or even helped ensure animal populations were stable. Pork is forbidden in Judaism and Islam. Pigs can carry trichinosis, especially in warm climates without refrigeration. This may have contributed to its status as taboo. In many indigenous Australian and Pacific Islander cultures, certain animals are tabooed during breeding seasons or for certain age groups, effectively conserving their population. Over time, this practical wisdom evolved into powerful spiritual narratives. The Andaman myth of forbidden vegetables, a fall from divine favor, and a great flood reflects this ancient pattern, suggesting it may be one of the oldest surviving religious ideas in human history, passed down orally for tens of thousands of years. Considering the Andamanese have been on their island for over 30,000 years, these ideas may go back even further, perhaps before we even left Africa. The Sentinelese are not fascinating because they're behind, but because they've opted out. In a world that rewards expansion, acceleration, and assimilation, they remained an outlier, a society that has deliberately resisted the gravitational pull of progress. While their neighbors were cataloged, converted, and consumed, the Sentinelese drew a line and never crossed it. To observe them from afar is to glimpse a version of humanity that once was. They are not a relic of a past, but a rare continuation of it. We often speak of progress as an upward slope, longer lives, better tools, infinite growth. But progress has costs. In gaining the modern world, we forfeited something else, something the Sentinelese may still possess. It's not comfortable nor convenient, but it's freedom in its rawest form. Freedom from algorithms, freedom from politics, freedom from society. They are not lost in time, they are free within it. If you made it this far, you're officially part of the tribe. So subscribe, comment what you want to see next, and hit that like button as hard as this coconut hit this poor Sentinelese woman. And if you want more, YouTube thinks you'll watch this video,